That is a lot of money for translations for only four languages.
Yeah.
But I guess it depends on the length or the difficulty. Hi, Rocky. Playing a little music from Poe and the Forefathers today. This is a song called Color of the Aina.
And I don't hear the music.
Oh, I guess I'm not sharing the sound. That's right. There it is. Hi, Alex. Got your note.
Sweet is the color of the Aina, and long
Let's
is
see.
the lifetime of the tree.
Quite a number of people RSVP'd.
Warm is the feeling of Ohana,
Um,
and
so we'll wait
precious
another
the
couple
keiki
minutes.
that we feed. But so hard is the Hana water for air, yeah. But righteous the moment swell free. So kick back, hey ho, or not near. Hanakako for a minute, let's shoot the breeze. Sit back, I want to share. Lay your burdens down, lift a pool off the tree.
Welcome, welcome. Hi, Jesse. Hi, Ati.
Hi, everyone.
Eola's in the kitchen. Disease in the mala makes it hot.
All right. Let's give it one more minute.
Feel the time of awakening
Welcome,
when
Jason.
all the rocks of the
Hi,
land will
Paul.
sing, singing glory, glory, hallelujah.
I am having internet issues, so I'm going to keep my video off. I'm also eating lunch, so I'm keeping my video off.
Okay.
Hi, Anna. Same.
Sounds good. All right. We'll get started now. Happy Friday, or maybe it's just a normal Friday. I don't know. There's a lot going on in the world right now, so maybe happy isn't the word to describe it, but hopefully there's you can find some joy in your day to day. To me, this convening is that. This network is that for me. Especially because today we have two amazing presentations. We'll do a quick welcome circle. We have, let's see, we have 16 people, so I think we can quickly go around and introduce ourselves. And then we'll have a presentation on the community garden survey that was conducted with the City and County Honolulu's community gardening program with Dr. Raj and Rocky Mahato. They're both on this call. And then there'll be a presentation from Anna Ezzi on her research on women identifying agroforestry practitioners. And then we'll have some time at the end for anyone else to provide updates, ask questions, pose challenges that they want solutions for, things like that. And then we'll close. So yes, so if you haven't already, you can change your Zoom name to your name if you would like your pronouns, your organization. Um, and I'll stop sharing so we can look at each other. And then let's popcorn it today. Um, I'll try and keep track of who hasn't already gone. But for those who don't know me, my name is Anna Mines. I'm the Community Gardens Project Manager with the City and County of Honolulu's Community Gardening Programs, and I'm co-facilitating this monthly Zoom call. And I'll popcorn it over to Jesse.
Aloha everyone, Jesse Littman from Kokua Kalihi Valley Roots Program. And I'll send it over to Ati.
Aloha kako, Ati Jeffers Fabro. I'm working with the National Park Service on a project at Makalapa Park, looking at community gardens there. And also at the adjacent Pu'uvai Momi public housing. I will pass it on to Alex.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Alex, and our host Corby. Sorry, I'm in the car, so I'm gonna keep my camera off. But I'm the Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems Program Manager for the City and County of Honolulu. And coincidentally, I also worked on some of the community garden projects with Dr. Raj and Rocky before I came over to the city. So excited to hear about the updates. I can't see, but I think I'll pass it to Jason.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Sean with the City and County of Honolulu's Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency. Also a food systems planner, and I work closely with Alex and Anne. I will pass it to Kate.
Hi, my name is Kate Eichstead, and I work for the Department of Parks and Recreation, and I am the coordinator of the Community Garden Program here in Honolulu. And I will pass it to Alice.
Thank you, Kate. Aloha, everyone. My name is Alice Liu. I'm the Food System Program Manager with Hi-Fi, and I will pass it to Melody.
Aloha, I'm Melody. I am with Ho'ola'aina Pili Pili, Accessible School and Community Garden. I will pass to Hillary.
Hi there. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. We're with Broken Hawaii. Small covered agroforestry. I'll pass it to is Ida. I'll pass it to Paul.
Aloha, everybody. Paul Arinaga from Grow Good, Hawaii. Nice to see you all. Hope everyone's hanging in there. And I will pass it to, let's see, Martin.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Martin. I also work at Grow Good Hawaii as a community coordinator there. I will pass it to, has Anna gone?
Wait, I'm guessing this, Anna. Okay. Thank you. My name is Anna Ezzi. I'm with the County of Hawaii. I'm an agriculture research and policy specialist in research and development. And I will pass it to, oh gosh, who hasn't gone? I'm so sorry.
Everyone, let's see. There's yeah.
Everybody. Hey, Anna, it's Kukui. How's it?
Oh, hello.
Yeah, I finally get to join one call. Thank goodness. Yeah, so aloha everyone. I'm Kukui, Mauna Kea Fourth. I'm part of the Ma'o team. And yeah, it's great to see everyone excited for today's presentation. Thanks for having me. Aloha.
And then there's someone on the call who's Ka'ohana Ilagan.
Me.
Oh,
Hi.
hi.
This is Lindsay Ilagan, also on the road, sorry. I am the program manager for healthy aging and community living at Hi-Fi and co-founder for the Student Collective. Aloha for having me.
Hi, Lindsay. And I think the last one is Ida.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for this invitation. I'm here to learn. Thank you. I'm treasurer at Dole Community Garden. Thank you.
Ida's one of our very active volunteers with the community gardening program. Did I miss anybody? Rocky and Subhashni, obviously. Sorry.
Okay, you go first.
Oh, we can't hear you.
I hear you. Okay, while Baki troubleshoots that, I'll go. I'm Dr. Shubhashri Raj. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Urban Regional Planning. I've met many of you in some way, shape, or form, over the last couple of years, and happy to be here sharing from our work that we've done with a city and county.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me now? Okay. I'm Rakhi Madhu. I'm a research associate working with Subhashni Raj at University of Hawaii. And I think I'm the last one.
Yes, so I guess my mind put you last because you'll be next to present. So you can introduce yourselves and yeah, we'll just jump right into it because we have two rich presentations and I want to leave time for questions. Are one of you wanting to share a screen?
Yeah, I'll share screen
Okay, make you
slides,
co-host.
okay?
Okay.
Apologies, that began at the wrong place. Sorry, you're seeing all the slides. That's not how it was meant to be. Okay, it did not start from the right place. But thank you all for having us on today. This work has been a labor of love between ourselves at the university and also with Anna and Kate at Parks and Rec at City and County. It's been a journey. It's been a 2-year journey that started with a student's research question that blossomed over time into a relationship and that turned into this project. So this project is a manifestation of more than just like a written product or just simply an output. It's also a demonstration of partnership and what good partnership between university, local government, and community groups can look like. And we're hopeful that, this would be the foundational work upon which the city and county can further their programming as they move this forward. These are just partner logos. Like I said, this was a joint collaboration between ourselves at the university and the Department of Urban Regional Planning and the City and County of Honolulu's Parks and Rec team. Just an overview of how we will go through this report today. And I also want to premise that the actual report that is linked in the agenda today has a lot of information and a lot of data. And in this work, we're only presenting snippets that we jointly agreed were important for like this call. But if there's anything in particular that you have questions about, you can always ask Anna or myself, and we can always get back to you. And the report is pretty thorough, so hopefully the answers will be in there. We from an academic point of view, my work has always grew out of gardens. Urban gardens, community gardens were the very first things that I started to work in when I moved to the United States in Buffalo, New York. And so all of my work is really tied to understanding place-based community relationships through these green spaces, these community gardens that are not always a given. In a lot of contexts, they're very contested spaces because land is so valuable. So in the context of Hawaii, we were really interested because this is one of the oldest community garden programs in the country, which began in the 1970s. And like Raki will share, it's one of those programs that didn't have an ebb and flow. It has continuity. And today we find ourselves with 11 gardens from like what began with one garden back in the 1970s. And between our interest and the city and county's efforts to how they want to think about the future of the gardening program, we built this research project to understand what the gardens, who the gardeners are, who is gardening, why are they gardening, what is working, and what might they need in terms of support to make these garden spaces feel safer, more effective, and so forth. So that's situated in where this work came out from. And in this work, we look at responses from 10 of the 11 community gardens. We use both survey data and qualitative data to make sense of the trends we're seeing. This survey had a pretty good response rate. We had 398 responses from the gardeners across the 10 gardens. So big mahalo to all the gardeners who took the survey, who took their time to provide us with the experiences that helped then inform this work. Like I said, we use quantitative and open-ended questions in the survey. It was translated into 8 languages for accessibility. And looking back at the data, we know that we received responses in all of those 8 languages. It was launched in 2023. And yes, this work does take a long time. It's now 2025 when we're reporting back, so it's 18 months. But we're happy to be able to finally share all of this with you all. We conducted this both online as well as in person at garden meetings, doing both paper surveys and on iPads. The total membership is about 1,500, give or take. And so we had about approximately 400 responses. And we took all of that data and really tried to understand where people are, where they garden, and the choices they make in terms of how much time and effort they're spending in these gardens. These might look like familiar sites for those of you who actually are members of one of the community gardens that the city and county runs here on Oahu. These are just some of the sample questions. So this particular question was one of our social network questions where we were trying to understand who is important in the garden in terms of information flow and so forth. These questions talk about the benefits of the garden itself to the people who use it, to the gardeners. So these are the Likert scale questions. You can see some of the open-ended questions there also, where we talk about the positive aspects of the garden as well as the drawbacks. Now getting into the findings. What you will see on your screen in terms of like the zip code is that when we map the responses, the dark blue is where most of the respondents lived. And so you will see that zip code 96797 is where a lot of our respondents lived. And if you look at the map next to it with the purple dots, which shows you where the community gardens are, you will see there is no community garden in that zip code. And so it really shows, mapping like this really shows that people are traveling and are willing to travel far and wide to have access to these spaces. And we have more detailed maps of different gardens and who is traveling to those gardens from where they live. But this is a really good illustration of how much people are willing to travel. And then at the same time, you can see where we didn't have responses from, there's no gardens really close to those areas. The other thing you will see is that a lot of our gardens are in the primary urban core. And then we have a few gardens that are, one is up in Wahiwa, one in Kaneohe, and the other one in Hawaii Kai. But most of them are concentrated in the primary urban core. So that's the spread of the gardens. But you can see a lot of people are traveling. You can see Kapolei, Iwa, all of these places to get to a garden where there are no gardens. In terms of the demographic makeup of the community gardeners in the gardening program, most of them are middle-aged or older adults. And majority of them have been gardening for over 5 years. And a lot of them have been gardening for more than 10 years. So these gardeners have stuck it out with the garden itself. And these long lengths of membership is both illustrative of how important the garden spaces are to members, and also an explanation for why the wait lists for these spaces are so high at the same time, because you have people holding on to these spaces for more than 10 years. So yeah. And looking more into why people are using their garden plots. So the thing with this question was they could select as many that apply to them. So that's why the numbers don't like add up to the 400 if you're wondering. But majority selected growing as a hobby first and then growing food for sustenance next. So we know that food for sustenance is an important reason why people garden, in addition to it being a hobby that they enjoy. We're going to move into questions that deal with garden management now. And these questions were really important for city and county in terms of like how they program and interact with gardens and to inform their own internal programming and conversations about what areas might need improvement. This particular question has to do with volunteering. Our presidents, vice presidents, all of these officer positions are actually volunteers who give up their time to manage the gardens. So we were really interested in understanding if these volunteers who've been in these roles either now or previously, if it was a good experience for them. And we found out that overall volunteering was a good experience, is what those who had been volunteers or are volunteers expressed. And when we asked if they would volunteer again, majority of the respondents actually said they would. They would volunteer again. It was that affirmative reaction was not as strong as no, we had a good experience. So there's some room to unpack why a large proportion of volunteers may not want to volunteer again. So this while it's good to see that more than 50% would volunteer again, there's still a large proportion that said we don't think so, or that they're on the fence. When we asked questions about communication and so forth, we found that there was satisfaction across the gardens with how communication between city and county and the gardens happened. But at the same time, you can see, so excellent and good is the dark black and the dark gray. And so you can see for Wahiwa, there is overwhelming support for that notion that there's good communication between the city and county and the garden coordinator and the garden offices. But then there are some gardens where that's not exactly the case. For example, let me see. Diamond Head, for example. Diamond Head is split in that response. So gardeners there, offices there felt yes, there's good communication, but a large majority there also said, we don't, it's either fair or poor. So that's one example of that. And Manoa is the other one, as you can see from these graphs. We also were interested in how these spaces were contributing to people's food security. So we asked gardeners what they grew in their plots, and the number one thing that everyone selected was vegetables. And again, this was one of those things where they could select multiple things, but almost everyone selected vegetables. And then herbs and flowers were the next two big categories. We also asked how growing food in the garden affected different metrics of food security. So, for example, food from the community garden increased their food security. They're better able to provide food for themselves, their family members, etc. So on all of these conditions, we got responses that very much was in agreement with those statements. So over 70%, for example, agreed that they ate more healthy and fresh food because they had access to this space and had this garden. We were also interested in how the gardens affected social relationships and personal growth. And over 90% of the gardeners reported that they formed new friendships, acquired new gardening skills, had increased physical activity, and actually deepened their own gardening knowledge. So we can see in terms of like just individual growth, these spaces provide a lot of support towards that. And just keeping in mind that a lot of our gardeners are either middle-aged or older, adults. The relationships, the friendships are really important, especially when we think about social cohesion or social isolation. So in that terms, the gardens really play a really important role for like mental health and so forth. We're gonna move into the garden networks section next. And in these network questions, we're asking gardeners who they interact with when they're at the garden. And the total number of interactions. We are also interested in who they go to for information. And what these two graphs are basically saying is that the president and other gardeners that are not officers are the two groups of people that are in most demand. That the gardeners interacted with the president or other gardeners that are not officers whenever they went to the garden. Interaction with gardeners was like 1,900 times per month, and the president was 642. But that makes sense because there are more other gardeners that are not officers than there are number of presidents. So that totally makes sense. But you can see like the interaction with the vice president and other garden officers is so less relative to how much everyone seeks the president out. And we map this in a network analysis. So this data is just for Wahiawa. But the Wahiawa data is actually representative of all the other gardens. I used Wahiawa because the most responses came from Wahiawa, so it's easier to map and illustrate, but you can see just how much more central the president is to the garden than any other officer, both in terms of like who interacts with them and who goes to them for information, and as well as who people want more access to. It's the president, even though the president is already the most individual that is interacted with on a monthly basis. So I think this is a great illustration of just how central the president is to garden governance and management. And just carrying on from that conversation, again, you see the same results for, who's important for getting information and who people want more access to. In both situations, the answer is president and other gardeners that are not officers. And the vice president is diminished in both of these responses again. Okay, so those were all of the quantitative results. I am going to hand over to Rocky to take us through the qualitative results at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Raj. So for the survey, we also did qualitative research where people were asked to give their answers more like open-ended questions, and we came up with some themes that kind of describe their responses. So for the when we ask about what do you like the best about the community garden, the most common response which is highlighted in yellow, was the opportunity to grow their own plants and vegetables, which was mentioned 39 times. Following that, 33 respondents expressed a favorable view of the program in general, like more like indicating overall satisfaction. Access to green space in the city was ranked third. Also, there are other key benefits like community connections, accessible to all, access to outdoor activities. Overall, I think this finding emphasize that community gardens are not just about the growing or the planting, they also foster social interaction and well-being. Next slides, Dr. So this is the direct a comment that which we received in the survey. So like being able to grow food for me and my family, nice and helpful fellow gardeners, good program for the community. These are for few of the examples from those responses. So when we asked about if they are going to, or the officers are going to volunteer again, community and operational benefits highlighted the most. Sense of duty and long-term advantage of sustaining and thriving community is, I guess, one of the reason that officers are willing to volunteer for the position. Also, community engagement mentioned as the second most important reason, emphasizing the social aspect of volunteering. Other motivational factors are personal development, having influence, appreciation from the community, are the responses. Next one, thank you. Well, the community gardens offer many benefits. There are also notable challenges. When we ask about what aspect they like list about their experience, the top three highlighted here are lack of operational management, like 28 responses, lack of safety, garden governance is the third one. So a specific problem within the lack of operational management category included irregular or poorly managed water schedule, the presence of numerous roaming cats causing a disruption, and sanitation issues, poor maintenance of the common areas, and similarly other concerns were long wait lists, lot of time, inflexible operating hours. So this is the comments that we received. The key issue about maintenance and accessibility, rules around 5 feet, and there's like a safety and security concern. There are many homeless people around the garden. So these are the common concerns that were raised in the survey. So when we ask if there are reasons for not volunteering as an officer, the most significant barrier to volunteering cited by 141 out of 253 total respondents was capacity, meaning individual feel they lack the time, energy, or resource to take up a responsibility, more like age related limitations or busy schedule, health conditions. Also, qualification and eligibility was the second highest rated one. So the eligibility criteria, perceived eligibility criteria around education or a language is another concern or a barrier that they think that's limiting them to be a volunteer. So yes, the language, perceived language barrier, my English is limited, work and personal time, more into the capacity. So these are the concern that was raised in the survey. We also ask about the improvement in our survey, like improvement around the community garden. So rules and regulation received the most attention, suggesting revision and better enforcement. Also, security and safety were another major concern by 49 respondents, stressing the importance of ensuring a safe environment within the gardens. Additional concerns were more about resources and supports, horticulture needs, expanding access, governance and communications, education and programming. So these are the comments that came in the survey, which that shows the improvements. Like, please de-emphasize the rules and regulation, offering garden workshops. So education and training was one of the highlighted one. Effective communication, helpful individual and community, but not impose excessive rules. So rules were very rules and regulation was highlighted the most, as I mentioned earlier. So moving to the so this part is about the recommendation that came from all the overall survey, I guess, overall findings. The first is clear communication of eligibility criteria, which will help ensure accessibility and transparency for potential participant. It is essential to communicate the absence of eligibility criteria for the gardeners, which is not there in the program, which can be stated in the promotional materials or like any outreach events or a meeting, which and also encouraging them or telling them in clearly would help to have more gardeners who will be interested to join. Additionally, supporting volunteers through flexible roles and leadership recognitions can improve engagement and retention. More like implementing flexible volunteering schedules, which we heard that they cannot volunteer because they don't have time and there's like an inflexibility in the timings. Also, shared leadership role can reduce the mentioned volunteering burden. For example, introducing co-leadership structures such as co-president can evenly distribute the responsibilities, making leadership role more manageable. Since our analysis, and Dr. Raj also mentioned that president role is very time consuming and it's most demanding. And the vice president role is underutilized. Perhaps having co-president instead would be more effective in sharing the workload. Alternatively, we also thought renaming the leadership role to garden leaders could shift perception and make this position feel more inclusive and approachable. Another equally important aspect would be volunteering, is recognizing the volunteering, more like there was mentioned that they don't get any recognition. So kind of recognizing their contribution in a meeting would be helpful. Third is transparent garden governance and conflict resolution mechanism. Many of the responses highlight garden governance as an issue for volunteer, and establishing transparent management practice through publicly available guidelines for gardeners and garden leaders will foster a cooperative environment. Similarly, for conflict resolution, the idea of garden leader circle can help the garden officers or leaders meet and exchange ideas and get troubleshooting tips from the garden leaders and other gardeners. Also, integrating technology can help in operational issues. For example, automated irrigation system, which can resolve ongoing concern about water scheduling. Solar power tools and systems can be helpful. The recommendation around security and safety. Uh, uh, thank you, Anna. Is crucial. The safety and security is crucial. Respondent addressed the challenges of presence of roaming cats and poor maintenance of common areas. To address this issue, clear signage prohibiting the feeding of animals should be installed in all the gardens. This could be a policy that can be communicated during the gardener orientation and reinforced in community meeting to ensure compliance. Also, physical activity and therapy are notable reason for using community garden. So partnering with local health organization, NGOs, or any local uh, wellness centers can be helpful to motivate more for the gardeners. Also, also gardeners also emphasized about the learning more about the gardening propose. So partnering with universities or any institutional organization would be helpful to for the training purposes for the gardeners. Mm, so this recommendations was mostly for the current gardens, and for the future gardens, Dr. Raz will talk about more about the future gardens.
Thank you, Rocky. Um, so so there are many recommendations in the report. We're pulling out just some of the ones that make sense to share today with you all. As we began, we said this is one of the longest running and oldest programs in the country. Actually, the Oahu Community Garden Program's coming up on 50 years this year. So it's a huge deal that we've had these gardens for 50 years. And one of the reasons for it is because it's on public land, because it's on city and county land, and city and county made a choice to make room for these gardens and hold that land for the last 50 years for this purpose. But in really tight land markets like Hawaii and California, these spaces are highly contested. And so when we're thinking about programming for the future, adding more gardens, expanding opportunities for gardening, we really need to think about how can we leverage more public lands where we have long-term ability to hold those lands for the public trust. I know that community gardens are not considered as part of the public trust doctrine, but given everything we know and what we've heard from those who make use of this space, I really do think that the city and county of Honolulu is holding this land in public trust for our garden users, for those who want to garden, who want this access. Because otherwise in the land market that we're in here, it's almost impossible. It's such a privilege otherwise to have access to this type of space. So that's one recommendation for the city and county moving forward in terms of expansion is to consider siting it on public lands where they have control over long-term viability, sustainability of those pieces, parcels over time. We're also recommending, based on the many maps that we've created for this report, that we think about geographic prioritization using travel and the zip code data. But we also want to emphasize that when we looked at the race and ethnicity data in this report, we found that Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders were very underrepresented. Underrepresented in membership relative to the number of Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders that live in the city and county of Honolulu. So there's also a need to understand what are barriers for Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders from getting from being able to use the garden. Is it a personal choice? Is it a structural barrier? How can we sort of think about this as well when we're moving forward in creating new gardens and new opportunities for gardening? One of the other things, reflecting back on like who our gardeners are aging. And if you've seen garden plots, most garden plots are at ground level. So it would help to have not just multiple plot sizes, but also multiple plot designs. So they're not just like at the ground level, but maybe some raised beds like you have at Foster and so forth. So just offering choice in both size and design, I think will help also accommodate gardeners as they age through the program as well. And which then talks about, diverse types of gardening opportunities. And while we have some answers to barriers for future volunteering, this is still a space where we need to do a little bit more work to unpack it. But we have we're at a good place to start that work, but we'll probably have to have more conversations in terms of unpacking that, because all of this data was collected through surveys. We haven't had the opportunity to interview gardeners to understand those barriers, because that would yield us richer and deeper information. So with that, Anna, I hand back over to you.
Sure. Thank you both so much for walking us through that. We have some time for questions. We'll just not have as much time at the very end for member updates because I want to give Anna at CA as much time as well to present. So maybe we can spend a few minutes on questions and then move to the next presentation. Quickly, just want to say, like, if you let this simmer and you have more questions after this call, or are reading the report and want, to pick our brains about it, feel free to contact me. I can happily field questions. It could be about the report. It could also be about partnering between the state and city agencies and um, you know, the how you might use this data to support your own efforts. Because even though this is specifically for our community gardening program and our specific style, I think there's a lot of evidence that can bolster community gardens of different types at different places. So I'll just stop with that. But yeah, any questions?
Alice asked a question in the chat about seedlings. Like how much are gardeners buying their seedlings versus propagating their own? So Alice, we don't know. We didn't ask the question, but we do know this, that especially at Wahiwa, they specifically asked about seeds and where they can get seeds at free or reduced prices. So I would say that seeds continue to be a challenge, but I think like within the garden group, there's a lot of sharing and mutual aid around that. I know that and this is what we heard from meetings, not necessarily like survey, when we were observing that some gardens put together sort of like they will collect recycling and then like sell the recyclables and the money they get, like, so they have their own like community projects. Through that they're able to like purchase certain things, and seeds could be one of those. A few of the gardens have composting that's happening now. So a lot of that is initiatives that each of the gardens have kind of decided that they want to invest in that. And then they support provided from the city and county to facilitate that.
A lot of our gardeners are, and maybe Kate, you can also verify, like a lot are growing things from seeds and getting really skilled at that.
And a couple even have seed starting committees, and they'll have kind of a communal area where gardeners can go grab some starts.
I think, Jason, do you have a question? It's direct message to me, but feel free to put me on the spot.
Thanks. Sorry. I was just wondering, because I was interested in those specific recommendations, and I was wondering, as a representative of the city, Anna and Kate, if you would be able to comment on those recs and maybe what the city is kind of doing based on this research.
So because this survey took so long, there's actually a lot of recommendations that were already kind of being enacted before this report came out, partly because we were learning about all of this. We were, gathering information and findings before they were, preliminarily, and also because one of the reasons that the survey was able to happen was because my position was created and we were already able to address some of the barriers. And then the questions that we asked in the survey were also based off of the needs that we were, creating. Some of the questions were because we knew that we know that people are discontent, right? So one of the things that was highlighted was the rules and regulations, and that's something we've we're very close to adopting a new version, but that's been like 2.5 years in the making. It's not really more like 10 years, but 2.5 years of concerted effort to revise and update the rules and regulations. Volunteer recognition is also a really big one. I think that's such an interesting, like I said in the comments, like the fact that people don't volunteer because they think they're not eligible, but there's literally no eligibility criteria. We have to do better at communicating. We've initiated an annual officer retreat for our officers, our volunteers. We're going to have like serve them lunch. We have t-shirts now. We're doing like a volunteer campaign. Um, what else? What was another big recommendation? I mean, we're like last month in this convening, Hunter presented on the geospatial analysis that was kind of in concert with the survey to help us identify where we should be expanding to. And we're really excited to be citing locations in the near future. Um, Working on a community engagement plan on that. Yeah.
I'll just add that even though the final report is only coming in now, like Anna and I and Rocky have been looking and Kate have been looking at this for like the past year. So like we had the data, we had like the recommendations fleshed out, and it was going directly to them. But like the formal nice version took it takes time, to build all the charts and do all of that stuff. So yeah, so Anna and Kate were very much abreast of like what the information was showing, what kind of things was coming out of like the qualitative research that Rocky was talking about, like what in particular about the rules people were having a hard time with. You will see the 5 feet rule and the thing about trees being in there and so forth. So even though it looks like you're getting the results now, they've had access to all of that. So this has been a conversation. We've been having a conversation, and now we're ready to like present the final version of that conversation to everyone.
There are two, I think it might be easier to even say what recommendations aren't we enacting on so far because and it's not because we won't eventually, but they're much harder for us to do, which is like integrating technology, um, having automatic payments or even just digital payments, and then creating safer and cleaner environments. It's really hard. We're experiencing more and more challenges with dwelling and theft and drug use in our community gardens, and that's a huge concern that people are actually leaving the community garden more than I think ever before because of this. Um, and I think there are some really good recommendations in the report on how we might better address that. I will cut this short, sadly, but of course, like I said, feel free to reach out with questions so that I can hand it over to Anna Ezzi to talk about her research. I'll make you co-host. Do you have slides you want to share?
Yes, thank you.
There you go. And if
Can
you
you
have any
guys?
other questions sorry, real quick, if
Oh
you do
no.
have other questions on the top of your mind right now for Subhashini and Rocky or myself or Kate, for that matter, put it in the chat and we can continue, keep it, you don't lose it. All right, go ahead.
Can you guys see those slides?
Yes.
Sweet. So thank you again for having me, Anna. And my name's Anna Ezzi. This presentation is actually my master's thesis from UH Hilo, and I haven't given it since I defended. So having a little bit of trauma jitters, but I'm really thankful to be able to share some of this work with you all and learn from you all. So my project was on agroforestry resources, gender, and local knowledge here in Hawaii. First and foremost, I just want to thank the 27 women who spoke with me for this project. And yeah, without their generosity and trust, none of this would be possible. And I've really tried my best to handle their stories in a respectful and meaningful way. I just want to start also with a little introduction to me and kind of where I'm coming from where I came from to this project. This is actually my hometown, Haiku Maui on the right. That's where I grew up, and yeah, basically how I came to merge gender and agroforestry in this way was it's definitely been a very long journey, but to summarize it briefly, I became involved in gender equity actually in college, where I saw my friends and classmates experience gender-based violence and be sent home from their universities. And I just started learning about kind of how gender systemically affects us, even in ways that are often invisible. So with that kind of in my background, I started working in ag, working for a cooperative focus on agroforestry producers. And I love that work and love getting to deepen my roots here in Hawaii. But I definitely noticed that gender was not really a conversation in a lot of those agriculture spaces. And I kind of started asking around and having informal conversations. And people said how women do a lot of work behind the scenes on farms. And again, it's this kind of invisible aspect, very complicated and culturally different for everyone. So, yeah, this project was really just my exploration into combining those lenses of a gender critical and also looking at agroforestry and regenerative agriculture. But I see this as very much an ongoing conversation that we all need to be a part of, and you all have a lot of knowledge and experience that I would love to learn from. So yeah, excited to be in this conversation with y'all. That's my little introduction. And now to introduce the actual work, the projects. So agroforestry is defined by the USDA as the intentional integration of trees or shrubs with crops and animal production to create environmental, economic, and social benefits. And the history of this term, it actually was coined around the 1970s to describe this agricultural solution to environmental degradation arising from industrial agriculture, which is connected with the systemic dispossession of indigenous peoples from their lands around the world. So here in Hawaii, there's a history of extensive Kanaka-iwi agroecosystems. Authors have modeled, before the year 1777, there's a potential of 1 million metric tons of food produced across the Pai'aina. Specifically in agroforestry, authors model systems that were huge, between 3,000 and roughly 6,000 hectares, such as the Kala'ulu in South Kona. And this painting is an artist's depiction of what the Kala'ulu could look like. These traditional land stewardship systems were disrupted by American occupation and the transition of these lands to plantation agriculture. And today, practitioners continue to face uneven access to resources for agroforestry. And when we look at gender in agriculture, there's a strong theme of patriarchy in conventional Western agriculture, with typically bringing to mind a male on a farm, and a farm wife is typically the role of what is a female farmer. And this legacy also can be seen today. Data from UHERO from last year, actually looking across 2012 to 2023, found a 55% income disparity between male and female identifying farmers, ranchers, and other land managers in Hawaii. And this was about $25,000 difference annually. Authors have also looked qualitatively at the experiences of women identifying organic farmers in Hawaii. Kimura in 2016 found essentially that the intersection of those identities of gender and, quote unquote, alternative agriculture further marginalize them from accessing support. But despite these factors, women are not considered a socially disadvantaged group for the purposes of USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service programs. And that's really important because these NRCS programs offer a lot of support to farmers. There's technical and financial assistance in the form of cost shares, and historically underserved producers are eligible for increased payment rates, advanced payments, and evaluation under special ranking pools and priority for funding. Specifically in agroforestry, and this is where recent political events have changed the context of this slide, but basically the IRA Inflation Reduction Act did direct $19.5 billion to NRCS programs to mitigate climate change, including agroforestry. And I was trying to look at the news before this, and I just saw that farmers are suing because those IRA funds are still frozen. We'd need to check with the NRCS to verify that, but I think that's true. So a big question is just how do existing social structures affect the distribution of these resources on the ground to producers? And I used a theoretical framework of feminist political ecology. It's basically just looking at both the gendered knowledge, how gendered relations of power affect how one gains environmental knowledge and whose knowledge ends up being valued, as well as gendered responsibilities, looking at how distinct gender roles affect access to resources and divisions of responsibilities. And I'm trying to go quick to fit into time, but my paper goes more into the theoretical part. So the objective of my study was to uplift the knowledge and experiences of women identifying agroforestry practitioners in Hawaii to help inform organizations offering resources to expand agroforestry. And I think this quote really demonstrates from one of the producers I interviewed. She said, "I think it'd be useful for other females to hear that their struggles are valid and that their feelings are valid, and then it's not their imagination that it's hard." And yeah, this is just really speaking to the power of connecting with one's community to really reveal some of these hidden challenges. So my specific research questions were one, first and foremost, how do women in Hawaii define agroforestry? Two, how are women accessing support and resources for agroforestry? And three, what factors are restricting women's access to resources and support for agroforestry? And my methods to answer those questions, I conducted semi-structured interviews. And yeah, these just really help to get that rich level of data, which couldn't be too easily captured in a survey. I also went about compiling a resource guide of what was out there for practitioners here in Hawaii. I used USDA resources to put this together, as well as just searches and word of mouth, talking to folks about state, county, and private resources. And I ended up finding technical support, funding, networks, research funding, and a few land access resources. I did outreach to producers. This is my flyer. I was looking specifically for folks who identified as women principal producers, so that means making at least 50% of decisions on farm, and then who are growing trees alongside other crops. I did exploratory interviews the summer prior with an awesome intern, and that helped create an interview guide using some of the language that I was hearing from farmers. So my interviews took place between November 2023 to April 2024, and the shortest one was about 30 minutes, and the longest one was over 2 hours. So they average about an hour. I spoke with 27 growers, and I do protect their identities using pseudonyms throughout this presentation. If you see names, it's not real names. And I in particular, wanted to speak with both women who are producing commercially and for subsistence. And I got a large range of age from 24 years old to 75. And same with experience from about a year practicing agroforestry to more than 60 years. And specialties including ulu, mamaki, kalo, wauke, new, cattle, and honey, and many more. And more than 60% of the women I spoke to identified as Native Hawaiian, which was particularly important due to the place-based nature of agroforestry. And this is a map of where everyone was located. So I managed to connect with people on Hawaii Island, Maui, and Oahu, which I believe most of you all are based over there. So little yeah, and then I just analyzed using first transcribing the interviews to transcripts, and then I coded roughly using a software, and then looking for more fine themes by hand. And then it was a process of writing to analyze. Okay, we're in the results. So for that first question of how are women defining agroforestry, I heard several strong themes. One was that agroforestry is really an unfamiliar term. And this quote showed that this woman said, when I first heard the word, I was like, what is that? And she kind of explained it to me. And I was like, oh, yeah, but I mean, we've been doing that for years. So unless you really take the time to understand what it is, you probably wouldn't really know that it's what you've been doing like forever and ever already. And I think this quote really shows what I was trying to dig into here between, these big institutions supporting climate smart practices, which are just rooted in the local practices here. And so I asked women, how do you picture agroforestry? What is that? What do you picture? And I heard themes of ohana and community and relationships between plants and between plants and people. Less of a productive system as more of an ecosystem with mutual benefits. And I also heard very strong themes of Hawaiians living on Aina and access to land and spaces as foundational to agroforestry here in Hawaii. And then again, building ecological resilience, considering other factors beyond simply preserving soil quality for production is more of a holistic perspective. This is a quote from a woman on Hawaii Island, and she said, when I think of agroforestry like Hawaiian agroforestry, I imagine Hawaiians back on Aina, and I imagine them taking care of their family in that system, which is abundant and has different layers. From the ground, you have the uala and you have the kalo and you have your avapuhi and your olena. And then you go up and you've got your ko and maia and you have your mamaki. Then above them, you have your ulu and your kukui nut. And with all these layers, you meet the family's diverse yet basic needs and the soil too. And that's what I feel like agroforestry is to me, a system that really can support the people in the community and family. So for the second research question of how are women accessing resources for agroforestry, I heard a mix of government and private resources, both USDA Farm Bill programs, some state grant programs, and a few county programs, and then private sources as well. And again, these are tables in my paper if you want to dig more into that. And some of the themes around that I heard from people who successfully accessed those USDA Farm Bill programs was this theme of a liaison between the USDA institution and the farmer themselves. So what I mean by that is like this translational labor. So a farmer told me, like, she was looking at a list of crops that were supported, and she asked, where's the kalo from on this list? And then she said, the agent said, you're right, where's the kalo? So that's the labor that I mean, working to tailor those programs more for this place. And then I also heard like from women saying, I love that my NRCS agent is from my community. So she already understands where we're coming from and our perspectives. And then a third form of liaison I heard about was actually from a nonprofit doing that work. And they had a cooperative agreement with the USDA to specifically support Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander access to Farm Bill programs. And this was a quote from a woman who, this is how she got connected with the NRCS. And she said, I've seen it firsthand what the halau is doing up there to grow their own food to provide for the halau families. I see what Kealakekua Mountain Reserve is doing, and I went through the application process and I actually got a grant. And I'm going through the motions right now. So it wasn't that bad, and if it's out there and it's available, you got to go check it out, go ask the questions, go get the answers that you need to hear so that you can then decide. And another really strong theme around access to resources was community as a primary resource. And this quote from a woman actually on Oahu, she said, I like the fact that my families, my friends, my community, I can do whatever I want with them. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Just kind of like straight shot kind, like none of this bureaucratic thing, red tape thing. I don't have to fulfill your demands or expectations or meet your timeline with something just for you to say, like, okay, I'm legit. And specifically in this theme of community as a resource, I heard growers speaking about preferring to learn from others who are actually farming and doing the work through helping out on their farms and observing, basically through Kilo and Malama Aina. And I also heard of, at the same time, I heard of a need for more connections with farmers and especially around learning about Kanaka knowledge in agroforestry. And that was both from people with lineal ties to Hawaii and without. There was a desire for more access to Kanaka agroforestry practices and knowledge. And then another really large theme was youth education as community connection and as a huge resource on people's farms. And that was something I wasn't able to like really dig into in this project, but it definitely is something to look more at in the future. I'm watching time. I have about 10 minutes left. So for my third research question of factors inhibiting access to resources for agroforestry, I heard several large themes. One was simply an awareness of resources or lack of awareness of resources. Where can I even have the time to look for support? It was something I heard a lot. And then for women who did know about resources and did want to apply to them, I heard about how specifically gendered responsibilities inhibited gendered responsibilities inhibited their access. So caregiving, for children, for parents, for a partner, and just the pressure to continue going after things and growing their business while they're trying to do all this labor, and just the stress of that. And family, but also at the same time, I call it here environment and community, but I am really referring to organizing community to protect lands from development. I heard from several women who were dedicating a lot of their energy to protecting lands outside of their farm's borders and how that drew their energy away from being able to build their farm. And this is a quote from a woman on Big Island, and she said, "We're in the reality of feeling bought out, sold out, and it's going to be a tight hui that really holds it down in our spaces. And it just so happened it ends up being a lot of women. In Puna, women are doing everything." So yeah, dealing with these larger forces outside of their farm, basically. And then for women pursuing grants, especially on farms that were that was their main source of income, I heard this strong theme of computer farmers. So they're actually being pulled out of the agroforest and onto their computer to go after grants and do all the administrative labor while their partners are maintaining the forests. So that is another really interesting kind of gendered geography occurring. So I'll just really quickly go through my discussion recommendations, but looking at local agroforestry definitions, the definitions I heard reflected gendered and cultural knowledges, and place-based ethics resources can help to reconcile these local definitions with among institutions that are offering support for agroforestry. And there's also a need to fit NRCS practice standards better to local definitions. And this is included in the USDA Equity Commission report. They recommend, which has been removed from the internet and I can't find it, so sad, but they recommend adjusting NRCS standards to include and equitably compensate for the use of Indigenous knowledge. And then there's also an act that was introduced in 2023, which called the Streamlining Conservation Practice Standards Act, which would help farmers have more participation in the definitions of the practice standards that the NRCS funds. And then also in the importance of land to definitions of agroforestry as a foundation of traditional ecological knowledge. I just wanted to share this some of this quote from a woman on Big Island, and she just said it very clearly with it's more than the concept of growing trees and food items or that symbolic relationship of noni and kukui and coconut. It's the space itself, right? And ensuring that we have these spaces to be in, and not just for us, but for keiki and first of all, our kupuna, and bringing our kupuna back to these spaces because it's been so long they've been disconnected. Obviously, there's a lot of work to do here, but I recommend simplifying and expanding community stewardship agreements across state and county agencies as one piece. And then on back to access to institutional resources and those success stories that I heard, and that translation happening between the institution and local conceptions and definitions of agroforestry. I really just recommend increasing funding for those cooperative agreements with local organizations and nonprofits to advance equity outreach and culturally appropriate technical assistance. And then lastly, on recognizing the impacts of gendered responsibilities, one, there's actually an act introduced called the Empowering Women in Agriculture Act, which would amend the definition of historically underserved producers for the NRCS to include gender prejudice. So that would be amazing. Obviously, this was done before January. But also placing value on the caregiving labor that women provide. And again, there was an act introduced that would expand childcare access in rural areas. And this is a quote from Lehua on Hawaii Island. She said, "If I do go back to farming, I think as of right now, it could be doable. It's just I need a babysitter." So in conclusion, gendered knowledges and responsibilities reveal really important social aspects of expanding agroforestry on the ground. And women practicing agroforestry are doing really critical labor and building community resilience. Successful access to USDA resources involves a translation of definitions, and this burden should not fall on farmers. And then just to sum it all up, valuing caregiving, including environmental and human care, supports women's access to resources for agroforestry. And future studies really should just continue this conversation, like I was saying, and analyze these themes through different perspectives. I'm just one person with my limited experiences. We also really need to dig into gendered aspects of land access, leasing and ownership, and then access to labor, particularly for highly gendered labors such as heavy machinery, where social power dynamics can affect how female farmers can navigate those things. And 2026 is the International Year of the Women Farmer. So just keep that in mind, and let's keep working together to support women in agriculture. Thank you again so much for listening. I hope this was interesting, and I'm always here to talk more, and I'd love to learn from you all what you're working on and any connections. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for speeding through that, all of the presenters speeding through all this really rich information. Any questions? I will be willing to stay on after 2:30 for anyone who is able, for any spontaneous or over spillover conversation.
Hi, Anna. I have a question. Amazing presentation, by the way, really insightful. I'm curious if you noticed any difference in, what these farmers told you about their definition of agroforestry when it comes to like a cultural, ethnic, like their ethnicity lens, that type of thing.
Hi, Martine, and thank you so much. Yes, I think that was definitely a major goal of the project, was to look at how ethnic and cultural identities affect or shape people's perspectives. And I dig more into that in my paper, but for sure, I really was comparing between like the USDA and more Western view of agroforestry as a real, we hear climate smart and it's like this tool to increase production while also supporting climate resilience. And that really contrasts sharply with what I was hearing from women, especially with cultural ties here in Hawaii and Kanaka women of agroforestry, like I was saying, of an ohana between plants and people and really just more of a relationship-based system. Um, yeah, I hope that answers your question. Awesome.
The resource guide that you made do you think it's still relevant? Is that something you could share with us?
Yes, I'll put that in the chat. I don't know what has been taken down. I haven't updated it since January.
There's a lot of people on the call who are involved in agroforestry or interested in being more involved in agroforestry. So I really appreciate you being here. Even if the immediate connection to food gardens, I mean, there's obviously a connection, but there's a little bit of a difference between farming and gardening, right? And yet I think it's something we're even thinking about. How can we better integrate trees? Because one of the things that we can't have in our community gardens are trees for myriad of reasons. So um, I really selfishly wanted you to be here to talk about your work. Um, Anybody else have questions? Hillary, I saw you went on camera.
Yeah, do you perhaps have a list of what each of these gals were growing, like per farm? Would you able to share
Yes,
that?
I actually do. Yes, it's in my paper. I'll put the link. I believe I pulled out more specifically. It's on page 20 if anyone's interested. I pulled out based on the agroforestry, the USDA practice, um, what they were growing in that practice. Yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
I will have the slides from the community garden survey and from Anna, if you can send me a PDF of your slides as well. And then this resource guide, I will have that in our resource folder and share that out in a follow-up email. Are there any other questions?
I just have one other. Do you have like showing how many of the farmers' size of their land, and if that provided all of their own food or food they could sell, that kind of thing?
I did not ask size. That would have been a good thing, but I do have like demographics on each of the women. So I have age and farm type where it's like commercial and subsistence, or it's just subsistence. Yeah, that's in page 15. Everyone asked about size. I totally should have noted that.
Hi, Anna. Thanks a lot for that great presentation. I guess it probably was out of the scope of your work, but I'm just curious if you did any even small degree of comparative research to see like gender in other countries in terms of agroforestry.
Ooh, very interesting question. Thank you. Yes, the majority of research on gender in agroforestry focuses on, developing countries or overexploited countries around the world. It's actually a really major topic in like development research. But there's hardly anything for Western or the US. It is very interesting. So and it's all that research was mostly like Western researchers going in and then looking at gender and cultural norms and kind of like focusing on those restrictions on women. So yeah, really
And
interesting. I wasn't able to use much of that.
oh, I was just curious kind of if you found any commonalities or major differences, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I think mine was such a different, more cultural looking in the culture rather. Oh, it's hard to describe that, but um yeah, a lot of the studies around the world, they're like uh um focusing on women's access to going in the forest and gathering items, and it's just very different divisions of labor. And then, like I said, the researchers coming in from outside culture are able to, I don't know, it's just really interesting, like applying Western culture analysis lens on those. I'm sorry, I'm just rambling. I'm not answering at all, but
No, it makes sense. I think, yeah, it makes sense what you're saying. Yeah, for
I
sure.
took a very different approach, and I was not trying to go like a more anthropology lens on like culture or gendered roles, if that helps. We should
Yeah.
talk more about that because I'm interested in your thoughts.
Well, I'm no expert. I was just curious if you had uncovered any interesting things about that. But yeah, thank you very much. Happy to talk more at any time.
I'll just have one quick comment. I love that idea of how the typical Western approach is like production and what can do. And I've been in that mindset myself as I've been trying to carve out like particular projects for people. It's so beautiful to that other perspective. I really appreciate that. It's like Ohana and anyway, it's really beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I was learning the entire time, and like I said, it's all thanks to those women that are doing the work and talking, sharing that with us.
Positioning both of these presentations together makes me think, how can we, I mean, we definitely were applying very like Western scientific model on the community garden survey in some ways. And then there's also the qualitative questions, but the social network and the fact that there's all these benefits, the community cohesion of growing food in community with one another. I wonder, um, I mean, that feels like an obvious direction of your work, Anna, like this, the fact that these, if you're providing resources for women who are in agroforestry, are you more likely to see benefits that go beyond productivity and food, pounds of food? I'd be curious to see that. Anyway, I saw that Kukui,
I think that it could be like this could be like the starting point for many conversations, right? Like so for our organization who does work on, a lot of initiatives within the agroforestry kind of pillar, we are able to sort of address many different kind of components, but they're not siloed from each other. They're like working together to undo the harm, whether it's the harm to the lands or the harm to the practice or the harm to our people. We're like trying to work it through so that there's a transformation from our engagement with our Aina and the food plants. For us, our starting point was very different. It was very sort of production based. Most of our mahi'ai are wahine or identify as wahine. Many of them, are of a certain age group, so they may be approaching, the stage, the makua stage. And I'm curious to know, now with having this relationship with Aina, how that will impact their relationship with their children and their families and their communities differently. And I see that like a strand, that Anna is talking about, you know, social cohesion and family and community nourishment, you know, like all kind of a strand that kind of, you know, flows through like all of these questions that I have, but like ours was production based, but where the purpose of that was to create an economic base so that we could go back to our traditional food crops, so that we could go back to the biocultural restoration processes of landscapes, right? So we're here on like a certain amount of acreage, but like the idea is that like this is for the whole valley, right? The watershed from the top of the mountain all the way down to the deep ocean. Um, and to me, that was what I found very valuable in your presentation today, is that like it's an intergenerational approach. And when we focus on women, we see the nurturing that that can come through that relationship in a very different way than we are even experiencing today. But we know women, you know, are the food producers in the world. And so, you know, it just on it to me it makes me think how we can better our own place to help uplift how they care about the world. So mahalo for, yeah, what a wonderful presentation, and leaves us all in a good place.
Thank you so much for your manao. That means a lot to me, and I was writing down little things you're saying, so we should follow up.
It is 2:30, so we can close. I do like landing on this tone and this note. And especially, you know, International Women's Day was last weekend. I think it's on our minds even more than ever with everything going on in the world. So thank you so much, Anna, for your presentation. Thank you, Subhashni and Rocky, for your presentation. If you have to leave, I'll say a hui ho, and thank you for being here. If you'd like to stay on, feel free to stay on. I'll be here.
I need to run, but thank you so much, Anna. That was really amazing, and it was fun to present to people actually really interested in this, because my department was all biologists, so they they're interested, but not like this.
That's the thing about your master's. A master's. Here, I'm gonna stop recording.